Welcome to the Brainiate Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rock star. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant and trainer, David Giller.
Hello and welcome to all of you. I am super excited for today's show because we are going to be talking about two topics in particular that are very near and dear to my heart. So the first topic that we're going to be talking about is how to make Salesforce training easy. And what I mean by that is very often Salesforce admins or other Salesforce professionals within the organization are tasked with training end users, the business folks, on how to use Salesforce. And this can be daunting, it can be overwhelming, it can feel like that is the last thing that I thought I would be doing in this job. Believe me, I can relate to all of those things. And I'm going to teach you how you can knock this out of the park very easily without purchasing any special software of any kind, and just really making it very fluid, very easy, and not nearly as time consuming as you would think. You're still going to have to dedicate time and effort into it for sure, but it's not going to be nearly as time consuming as you would think. The second topic that we're going to talk about in the Show Me section is basically going to be how to convey or resolve complex problems, how to communicate with colleagues about complex topics or issues using simple pictures. And this might seem completely foreign. It might even seem like, why on earth, as a Salesforce professional, why on earth do I even need to know about this? I can tell you that for myself, this is something that I completely, I'll say, accidentally stumbled on, and it has totally changed the game in terms of how I communicate. I stumbled on this years ago. Off the top of my head, I want to say maybe 15 years ago. It has completely changed the way that I communicate, both with in-person meetings, when we have in-person meetings, as well as in virtual meetings. So if you're on Zoom, etc., as well as even putting together any type of presentation or really in any one-on-one working session with anyone. So those are the two main topics that we're going to be talking about. And then, of course, we have open Q&A, where for those of you who have never joined this show before, the open Q&A section is where you can ask any question, whether it's on anything that we've already talked about during the show or any other Salesforce related question. And I'm going to do my best to answer them. And by the way, a couple of folks have submitted questions in advance, so I do have some things that I can focus on while some of you might be lingering with your questions. But without further ado, we have a lot of material to cover. Let's jump in to the first topic of the day. And no, we're not supposed to be on the last page. Oh, geez. Hang on one second. Let me, and why is this not working for me? Okay, hang on one second. And it went all the way to the last page, so it's not supposed to do that. So we're going to jump all the way to the beginning over here, and I will walk you through all of this. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is how to deliver end user Salesforce training without losing your mind. And let's talk about why is it that so many organizations struggle with this? Why is it that end user training is so painful? There are a couple of reasons why, and it really boils down to, usually 99% of the time, it comes down to these few reasons. The first one is lack of leadership support. And by the way, this looks like a lot of things. So leadership support, yeah, leadership might say, oh, of course, we definitely want Salesforce. We want everyone to be using Salesforce. They might also say, oh, of course, we want everyone trained. But they have not really dedicated the appropriate level of budget, money, of time, or of resources to actually make sure that training is done appropriately. And if in the end, if leadership is not fully on board, and if senior leadership doesn't think it's all that important, that message will trickle down throughout the organization, and not enough time will be allocated to it. People are going to be allowed to have any excuse whatsoever to not even attend the training. Nobody's going to put in a whole lot of effort into delivering or crafting the training materials. It's basically going to be an afterthought. If you don't have leadership support, it's basically a waste of time. Nothing will get accomplished. And then everyone is going to be super frustrated. So that is absolutely the most common reason why end user training fails. The next one is failure to engage the end users. Now, by the way, what I'm talking about over here is even if there is leadership support, even if senior leadership, even if the company has dedicated the appropriate budget and time and resources and people to put together the appropriate training and to deliver it, whether it's in person or remote, it really does not matter. If in the end you have end users who feel it is not worth my time, I am smarter than that, how stupid do you think I am, I can figure it out, it looks easy, I used Salesforce at my last job, you're not going to, like, if you don't address it, you're not going to get them to sit in their seat long enough to be trained. You're not going to get them to pay attention to the training. So this issue needs to be tackled. You need to address it. And if you don't address it, you can have them sitting in the room. They're not going to be paying attention. They're not going to care. So we need to be aware when this issue comes up, and then we need to also figure out how to address it, which, by the way, I'm going to get to all of these things within my solution that I'm going to be sharing with you soon. The next one is a poorly developed training material, where the actual, once we get to the training, once everyone is in the room, and when I say room, it could be virtual, it could be in person, doesn't really matter. Basically, training that sucks. And this looks like a lot of different things. You could have trainers, the people who are asked to get to the front of the room and teach people how to use Salesforce. They don't even understand what it is that the users do on a day-to-day basis. That's a horrific situation, because what's going to happen then is the trainer is going to be talking about whatever it is that they think is cool, the shiny new object. They're going to be focusing on the flow that they built or the integration that they built and how cool it works. They're going to be talking about the cool formula fields that they built and the pages with the different page layouts for each record type. Users could not care less about any of those things. All users care about is how to do their job with the least friction, how to leverage the system to do their job easier, how to close more deals, how to spend less time on the phone with customers and prospects and be more efficient about it, and to be more successful in their jobs. They don't care whatever the Salesforce developer or consultant or admin built that might be really a cool, shiny object behind the scenes. They don't care about all of the different apps that have been set up in Salesforce. They just want to do their jobs. And if the training material is not in line, completely in line with what it is that they do and how they are expected to do it and how they should be doing it in this system, you've lost them. Even if you have the first two things listed right here, even if you have leadership support, and even if you have users that start off engaged, and the person at the front of the room is talking about all of the shiny objects behind the scenes that went into setting up Salesforce. Oh, look at this button. You want me to show you what this button does? No, they don't care about the damn button. The users care about doing their jobs. If the button can help them do their job, then they care. So if you start by talking about the button, you've lost them. If you start by talking about their day-to-day painful manual experience of how they do their jobs today, and then show them how this button will solve that pain point, then you have their attention. There's a big difference here. By the way, when I'm talking about poorly developed training content, very often what this looks like is no actual training classes or videos, but documentation. Because in many organizations, they're used to creating PowerPoints or PDFs and sending them out to users to show them, here's a cheat sheet. We're going to print these up and bind them laminated pages so that you can have it on your desk anytime you need to use the system. That is a huge waste of time, money, and resources. Why? Well, for starters, if you're going to have printouts of any kind, and when I say printouts, it could also just be the digital version of a PDF or a PowerPoint. You're going to include screenshots, right? Well, what happens by the time you hit save on that PowerPoint or the PDF? Screenshots probably changed. Someone probably asked if the page layout for these users, for these types of records, could be changed. Or over the next few months, Salesforce releases a new enhancement that changes the user interface in some way. So now whatever appears on the left-hand side now appears somewhere else on the screen, lower down, higher up, on the right-hand side, in the middle, behind the second tab, whatever it might be. And your PowerPoints and your PDFs are a complete waste. They are totally outdated within a few days, within a few weeks, within a few months, let alone in order to cover all of the material that the people need in order to know how to do their jobs. Those digital documents or paper documents, if you're going to have them printed and bound and laminated, are going to be hundreds of pages long. And a user is not going to have any idea where they should even start because they're going to feel like you threw an encyclopedia at them. So it's just as worthless as not having anything. So poorly developed training content looks like a lot of different things, and those are just some examples. Last one, no follow-up support. Actually, no, this is not the last one. I have one more, I think. No follow-up support after the training is completed. So after the training is done, basically, we're done. We handed out those PDFs. We conducted a class. Everyone came for 1 hour, for 2 hours, for 8 hours, whatever it is. And we trained them, and that's it. We're finished. No, training is never finished. You're always going to have people who get promoted within the organization. Yesterday, they were a sales rep. Today, they are a sales manager or a sales director. They are a VP of sales today. They have different responsibilities. There are different records that they're able to see. There are different apps that they're expected to use. How are they supposed to know how to do their job? All they know is how they used Salesforce before in their prior role. You're going to have people who leave the organization, people who come into the organization. You're going to have different apps that are retired, new apps are introduced. Who's going to train people on how to use those things? So training is really never done. To some extent, it needs to be an ongoing effort. You need to have refresher training. You need to identify of the training that we did, what open questions do people have, what follow-up concerns do people have, what are people still struggling with, what feedback do they have on how we could probably enhance the existing implementation. So it's not just a one and done instance of, yeah, we did this one time many years ago and we finished. It's an ongoing thing. Okay, that was the last one. So what are the most common mistakes that companies make when training their employees? So a lot of these are going to seem familiar because they're just more examples of what I mentioned earlier. They put together the wrong curriculum. They train people on the wrong things. They don't include things that they do need, and they include all kinds of things that are totally irrelevant for the people sitting in the room. They pick the wrong trainer. Very often, the person asked to get to the front of the room to do the training is the person who did the configuration. Usually, stereotypically, the person who did the configuration is usually not of the personality type where they enjoy public speaking. Usually, they don't like being at the front of the room. Usually, that person has no training and no background in terms of education being a trainer, being an educator. Usually that person has never put together a curriculum or delivered a curriculum in their lives before. Putting that person in the front of the room, asking them to do the training, is a recipe for disaster. Sometimes it's the wrong delivery. The wrong delivery could mean they spent a total of 1 hour on Salesforce training. You roll out Salesforce for an entire organization. You spend thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on the implementation and spend a grand total of 1 hour on the training. You know what that's like? That's like buying a brand new car and giving it to a teenager who has never sat behind a steering wheel before. Basically, you're giving them a 1 hour crash course training on how to drive and how to drive this car. You can pretty much guarantee that it's not going to go over too well. And within the first 15 minutes, you've already lost them with a lot of the concepts and details that you're trying to cram in to that 1 hour. And then we have the wrong approach, where really the organization just wants to check off the box to say, yes, we did training, here's what it looked like, here's the PDF, and we're done. Sadly, this happens very, very often. So let me tell you a little bit about how I learned about this topic and how I came to do Salesforce training in the way that I do it today. And for those of you who have seen me or heard me explain this before, I apologize. For those of you who have not, I will be brief about it either way. So first of all, almost every job I have ever had, aside from whatever my core responsibilities were, somehow training people on how to use different systems or how to do certain things, how to do their job, somehow that was always it was a fraction of my responsibilities, but somehow it was always a part of my job. So I had many years where I was essentially forced to be at the front of the room and to do the training for different audiences. And I got a lot of feedback that helped me improve everything about the way I do training. But really the pivotal moment for me came in about 2008, 2009. I was working at GE Capital. I was part of a small team that rolled out Salesforce across approximately 10 different sub-businesses, approximately 2,000 users. So I was at a headquarters level at GE Capital, and one of my colleagues who was responsible for doing the end user training for all of our end users, she was moving on to another job, and my manager turned to me and she said, you know how so-and-so has been responsible for training all of our end users in Salesforce? I'm like, yeah. And you know how she's taking on another job? Yeah. Well, I need you to take on her responsibilities in addition to everything else that you're doing. And I exploded. I'm like, are you freaking out of your mind? What on earth makes you think that I want to do this? Like, do you realize that I was involved in the implementation and the business requirements gathering and the actual rollout of Salesforce and all of these other Salesforce related projects, like end user training? In my mind, that was like going 10 steps backwards in my career. I had no interest in doing the training whatsoever. Anyway, this woman turned to me, my manager turned to me, and she basically arms folded. We very much had like a mother-son kind of relationship. And she arms folded. She just waited for the steam to come out of my ears. She waited for me to stop blabbing. And she turned to me and she said, I know, but everybody loves the way you do training, and I need you to do it anyway. And I turned to her and I said, that's crazy. Like, I don't really care. And being impressed with my training, like, so that's like being impressed with a peanut butter sandwich. Like, it's really not a big deal. I was not trained as a trainer. I have no education in being a teacher of any kind. And she's like, yeah, well, still doesn't really matter. You need to do it anyway. And I turned to her and I said, well, are you going to put me on a plane and have me chase all of our 2,000 sales reps all over the United States and pull them into a conference room and say, no, listen, buddy, you need to listen. You need to watch me. You need to be in this course. I need to spend about 6 to 8 hours with you, teaching you how to use Salesforce. I said, that's not going to happen. They're not going to even want to pay attention to me. And I don't want to be on airplanes chasing them. And no matter what, I'm going to be the punching bag of every sales rep in the organization who says, yeah, my data is dirty, my pipeline isn't updated because that Giller guy, he talks too fast, he wasn't available, he didn't explain things right. I'm going to be everyone's punching bag. And she still sat there and she's like, yeah, you're still going to be doing it anyway. So essentially, I came to this. I realized that, all right, I really did not have a choice. So I came to this from the perspective of I did not want to spend a whole lot of time or effort or energy, or then the company was not about to spend a whole lot of money on me doing the training. And I did not want this to take over my job. So I put together the framework that I'm about to share with you in a way where it was scalable, it was simple, and it required the least amount of effort that I could come up with. So I did this at GE, and then I realized this freaking works. And I essentially positioned myself in a way where end users could not possibly open their mouths to their manager and say, yeah, I really don't know how to use Salesforce because of that Giller guy, or because I wasn't trained. I eliminated that possibility entirely. So let me move on and share with you what it is that I've learned through this experience. So essentially, it boils down to two very simple things that you need to know. You need to know what it is that you need to know in order to do the training, and what it is that you need to do. Very simple. Okay. So first, we're going to focus on what it is that you need to know. In other words, what the homework that you, as the trainer, the homework that you need to do before you ever get in the front of the room or as presenter in a Zoom meeting to deliver the training. So what do you need to know? First thing that you need to know is who needs the training. And when I say that, it might sound very simple. You might even be rolling your eyes like, duh, that's obvious. It is not always obvious. When asking within the organization who needs the training, you need to get granular, as in which departments. Is it everyone in sales? Is it all Salesforce users? Is it all Salesforce users, including the executives? Or is it just the people who are doing prospecting within the organization? Or is it only the people who are doing customer support? And even within those groups, departments, divisions, business units, whatever you want to call them, we need to also identify specifically which individuals are in that group or multiple groups that need to get trained. So the first thing you need to know is who needs to get trained. The second thing you need to know is what features do they need to be taught? And the way you're going to do that is, first, you're going to team up with some key representatives from each group. So once you have identified, in the prior step, you've identified the different groups that need to get trained and the different individuals within those groups, you then start asking who are the one or multiple people within these groups that I can meet with to better understand their business processes, what it is that they do in their day-to-day job, whether it's in Salesforce or not. You need to know what day in the life is like for those people that need to get trained. And then you need to, quote unquote, look over their shoulder. And by the way, even if you're doing this remotely, you do it as a Zoom meeting and they are sharing their screen and they are describing and showing you, whether it's in Outlook, whether it's in Salesforce, whether it's in Excel, whether it's in your AS400, I don't care what systems they're using. You need to understand what they do and how they do it. You need to see what they are actually doing in order to perform their jobs on a day-to-day basis. And as you can see lower down on the screen, the best practices are you need to take notes. You need to grab screenshots when practical. Now, by the way, the easiest way to do this is make it a Zoom meeting. And when I say Zoom, it could be WebEx, it could be a Google Meet, it doesn't really matter. But you need to make it, it's preferred, it's easier for you if you make it a virtual meeting, an online meeting where you are recording it. This way you can take notes, but you also know that you have the recording that you can rely on. By having the recording, it makes it easy for you to reference the systems that they were using. You can grab screenshots where you can see exactly what does that piece of paper, that PDF that they receive from an external source, what does it actually look like? What pieces of data are contained on that PDF? That Excel spreadsheet that they keep using that is totally nonsensical, that is going to be eliminated by the rollout of Salesforce. What are the columns and rows that are represented in that spreadsheet? What are the different tabs in that spreadsheet? How do they use that spreadsheet? When do they use that spreadsheet? You need to understand all of these things. You need to make sure that the person you're talking to, that they truly do represent the other members of their team. And it's not just you're talking to Susan and Susan's the only one who does things this way. No, you need to make sure that Susan actually represents her team, whatever that team might be like. And you also need to listen very carefully to any pain points, and you need to identify any of the manual, clunky, time-consuming steps that they are doing in their process as they are giving you this walkthrough of how they do their jobs. So this is what you need to do. So first, who needs the training? Then you need to know what features need to be taught, and the only way you're going to know that is by understanding their processes, what systems they use, the pain points that they're experiencing. Some of them they might not even articulate. They're just saying, yeah, like this is what I do. I just cut and paste from here to there, every single time. And you're like, oh my God, that's crazy. That shouldn't happen. They should just hit, let's say, the clone button, or there should be an integration, whatever it might be. You need to identify what those things are because you are going to use them later on in your training. And that's how you're going to keep their attention when you're doing the training. Next, you need to know how. How would you, if you were placed in their job as an end user? It's one thing for you to be the Salesforce admin or the Salesforce developer or the Salesforce leader within the organization. It's another thing for you to actually try to perform the steps that they are expected to do in Salesforce. Log in as them, and if they're expected to create a new contact, make sure that they have access to actually create a new contact. Go ahead and see what it's like. Go ahead and experience for yourself in private, not in front of a big room. Experience for yourself what it's like to hit new on that contact script for the contact record and to see all of those fields out there. And there are only 4 fields that they actually have the data for, typically, to populate, and how painful it might be to find those 4 fields that they're always looking to populate sprinkled throughout the rest of the screen. You need to do this before you ever get in the front of the room in order to do the training. Now, at the same time, as you are going through and sort of like silently playing the role of the typical end user, you need to try to address as many of the pain points as possible by showing how native features can solve these issues. And a lot of times, most of the time, they can be solved by list views, by using filters, by doing search, by just knowing how to use favorites. So you need to look for some of these opportunities to address some of the pain points. Those are the things that you need to know before you get in the front of the room. Next, what is it that you need to do? You need to actually simulate the end user experience in Salesforce, if I didn't make that clear already. So you need to actually go ahead and do it. You need to see how easy or difficult it is. You need to see what steps are involved, and you need to start taking notes on all of it. And by doing that, you are now going to start building out your curriculum. So you're going to go back to the notes that you have from your meeting with them, the different pain points that they had, your own personal frustrations when you tried to simulate what life is like for them, your own personal experience by saying, oh, I created this list view because they said that they always need to look at records that are, let's say, assigned to them that meet certain criteria. You've created this list view. So you are now building out your notes, which in turn becomes the curriculum that you are going to use to train them. And you need to make sure, does your curriculum actually cover their primary use cases? Did you address at least some of the pain points that they currently have, however it is that they're doing their jobs today? Now, this is what a typical curriculum might look like. So if you have users in sales, as represented on the left-hand side, you have sales, and in the middle you have marketing, and on the right-hand side you have service. So for folks in sales, typically when it comes to features, they need to know navigation. They need to know how to use Chatter. If you're using Chatter, they need to know how to use leads. If you're using leads, they need to know how to work with contacts and accounts, with activities, with opportunities, and with reports. And for each of these things, they need to know how to find each of these records, how to work with each of these records, how to edit these records, and how to create new records of the same type. If you're someone who's in marketing, guess what? Marketing, as you will notice in the column for marketing, marketing does not have opportunities because typically the people in marketing are not working with opportunities. So don't put opportunities in their curriculum. They don't need to know about it, but you definitely do need to focus on campaigns. And if we look over on the service side, you're going to see that for service, they have neither opportunities nor campaigns, but they do have cases. So you need to understand basically to overlap the day-to-day experience and responsibilities that users have within the organization and how that overlaps with features in Salesforce, features, objects, apps, third-party apps, whatever it might be. You need to sort of make that connection so that when you're doing the training, you are making sure that you're covering the core areas that relate to these users in their jobs and what they need to do. So now that we've simulated what we've heard what they need to do, we've simulated what they need to do, we put together the curriculum, now it's time to deliver the training. And now you might be wondering, well, is it going to be on-site classroom style or is it going to be web-based? Now, the truth is, in some ways it doesn't really matter, but in other ways, even if, I'll tell you that as a trainer, it is almost always a better experience for me when it's on-site classroom style. Why? Because I can see the facial expressions, I can see from the body language, I can see if people are engaged. Senior leadership, if senior leadership is engaged, senior leadership shows up in the room. Senior leadership sees the people who are not engaged, so nobody is surprised when those people later complain that they didn't understand and they don't know how to use Salesforce and they don't know how to update their pipeline. Yeah, because they were on Facebook the whole time in the back of the room. Or they stepped out of the room in the morning and they didn't come back until after lunch. That's why. So on-site classroom style is preferred, but even if you're going to have on-site classroom style, you still need to do the web-based training, essentially the exact same curriculum. You need to also deliver it in a web-based approach because you're going to have people who couldn't make it to on-site. You're going to have people who, they had a snow day, they had a sick child, they had some issue of some kind, they had to walk out on day 3, whatever it might be. And you need to have those recordings to be available for them as resources where they can go back and they can access them and they can watch them. So even if you do the on-site classroom style training, you still need to do the exact same training in a web-based model. Now, for the recordings, as I mentioned a moment ago, you're going to need the recordings and you're going to need them for new hires, for people who are promoted internally within the organization, for people who, for whatever reason, missed it the first time. By having the recordings, you will also make it easy for people who need to watch the same thing over again because maybe the first time they were flustered or they were distracted or they got only some of it, not all of it. By having the recording, they can watch it again. They don't even need to bother you to ask you more questions on how to do the same thing. They will watch it again as many times as they need in order to understand how to do it. Now, my recommendation is that when you're doing these web-based trainings, to schedule them as live sessions 1 hour at a time. Don't do more than an hour. I don't care if you have 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours of training that you need to do. You only schedule them as 1 hour sessions through the web, and you put it together as a weekly cadence on alternating days. Don't make it sequential days, consecutive days, because if you do that, people who are going to still be overwhelmed from Monday session, and Tuesday they're not going to be able to process anything. So choose like a Monday, Wednesday schedule or a Tuesday, Thursday schedule, and just keep doing it until you're done with your entire curriculum, till you've covered all of the material that they need to learn to do their jobs in Salesforce. After you're done with that, I talked about how it's an ongoing thing. Schedule ongoing lunch and learns to gather feedback. One of the beautiful things about this, now as a Salesforce admin, some of you might be like, I don't have time for that. Give me a break. They're going to just bother me. They're actually not going to bother you, and they're going to really appreciate it. So all you really need to do is go ahead and schedule it as like on office hours, as a meeting where you send out the invite to everyone who has access as a Salesforce user, and even remind them in advance that, oh, by the way, Tuesdays from 11 to 12, don't forget, like, here's the link to the Zoom meeting. If you have any questions or anything, any feedback that you have on Salesforce, just join the Zoom meeting. I can pretty much guarantee that you're not going to have more than 5 people ever join. There are going to be plenty of sessions where you're going to be the only one there, and you can just do your own job. You can multitask to do your own thing during that time slot without any interruption whatsoever. Now, even if people do attend, you're giving them a forum where they can complain, they can ask for enhancements, they can, even if it's a stupid question, they can ask it in private and they don't have to feel embarrassed about it. Whatever it is, it'll allow you to address those issues. And what it will also do is it will eliminate people grumbling and complaining behind the scenes. Even if nobody shows up and you keep promoting it internally within the organization, put it on the Slack channel and email it out to people, put it on the homepage to remind people about it. By doing that, you're going to position yourself where folks cannot complain to their manager that your training was not sufficient, because their manager is going to turn to them and say, well, did you at least attend the lunch and learn to ask some questions? Oh, you didn't do that either? Well, who's to blame here? So it's really important to do that. Anyway, that's it for this topic. Let's move on to, where's my right screen over here? Let's move on to the next topic real quick, which is solving complex problems with simple pictures. And for this, what I'd like to do is I would like to, actually, before I show you, let's talk conceptually a little bit. So we all know, we've all been in situations where graphics, images of some kind allow us to, even for us on the receiving end, to better understand certain complex things that would take a whole lot more of words to convey. And you know the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's true. I mean, think of it as you're driving and there are signs, and this holds true around the globe. There are signs with no words, simple symbols, images that convey certain things. And it's a lot easier for us as humans to understand and to process these concepts by simply referencing images, graphics. And we experience this everywhere in our personal lives, and it applies in the business world as well. This holds true for gathering business requirements, for capturing and documenting business processes. This holds true when, as Salesforce professionals, we need to explain to business folks the database architecture. They might be asking us a question that relates to Salesforce, and they don't understand why information about the contacts does not display on every opportunity or on every account or on every activity. And we are the ones who need to convey to them the database architecture. And they're not database people. They don't understand databases. They couldn't care less about databases. But we need to explain to them how these are different tables, different objects, and there might be a junction object, or it might be a lookup. And we need to explain these things to them so that they understand what's going on or why the system works the way that it does. This also holds true as Salesforce professionals when it comes to sharing permissions in Salesforce, the use of roles and profiles and permission sets, and why do certain people see certain things when they shouldn't see them. Graphics will allow us to either receive information from people and create those graphics on the fly during meetings to make sure that we accurately understand what they're conveying, or for us to be the ones to create those images and give them to others so that they understand what we are trying to explain. By the way, this also holds true for integrations of any kind. It could be Outlook or Gmail. It could be with an ERP system. It could be with, honestly, with anything at all, where drawing up some graphics, and when I say graphics, it could be simple stick figures that will help you get over some of these hurdles when it comes to communications. Now, let me give you as an example, for those of you who have ever purchased anything in IKEA and tried to put together any piece of furniture that you purchased in IKEA, you probably ended up with a printout that looks something like this. And look at how many words there are on here. Very few. And it's simplistic images in order to convey certain things. So it could be steps in a process. It could be limitations of certain things or how things work together. So think of it as you need to leverage this concept when you are working with others as a Salesforce professional. Now, what I'm going to tell you is how I personally have learned this. I learned this through a bunch of books that I somehow stumbled on. I don't even know exactly how I stumbled on them, but I stumbled on a bunch of books by a man called Dan Rome. And here you see one of his books. It's called Unfolding the Napkin. For me, it all started with this book called The Back of the Napkin. And it's called Back of the Napkin, Solving Problems and Selling Ideas with Pictures. And we're talking very simplistic images. And then I found his other book called Unfolding the Napkin, which really shows more of the how to implement the concepts that he talks about in his other book. And he also has this book called, which I think is kind of funny, Blah, 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 What to Do When Words Don't Work. So what I'm going to show you is how I typically do this. First, I'll actually explain a little bit. What I typically do, so let's say even before COVID, all of us are in person in a conference room, and I'm sitting with one or two other individuals, and they're trying to describe to me something that they want or need in Salesforce. And I'm trying to understand what their business process is that correlates to whatever it is that we're talking about. And as they're describing, I would look for a whiteboard or a flip chart, whatever it is, and I'll start grabbing markers and I'll start drawing. Whatever it is that they're saying, I will start drawing it out on the whiteboard to make sure that whatever it is that they are trying to convey, that it's actually represented. And what I do today is I do the same thing, but I do it digitally. And you can do it. So the tools that you'll use to do this, there are just so many tools, and they are not expensive. So if you're in person, just use a whiteboard, use a flip chart. It doesn't really matter. And by the way, afterwards, you can just snap a picture of it with your phone. You can always digitize it later. You can digitize it in PowerPoint, in Google Slides. You can use a tool like Lucidchart if you want to. Lucidchart is freaking amazing, by the way. I love Lucidchart. You can use, if you're in a Zoom meeting, Zoom natively has a whiteboarding feature built into it where anyone can also draw on the whiteboard. My personal favorite, by the way, is to use the iPad. So what I do is on the iPad, and by the way, you could use any stylus. And when I say iPad, if you really wanted to, you could probably do this with any other type of, just moving the screen a little bit. You could also do this most likely with other tablet devices as well, so long as there's some type of app that will let you do whiteboarding. So what I typically do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to create a brand new whiteboard, a brand new whiteboard document, and I use the Apple Pencil. You can use any stylus whatsoever. So let's say someone is talking to me about they don't understand how certain pieces of information on the opportunity they want to see on contacts. And I want to convey to them the database architecture of how contacts roll up to accounts, and accounts are associated to opportunities, and contacts can be associated to opportunities as well by the opportunity contact roles, yet they as an organization are not even using opportunity contact roles, yet they have this expectation that all the details of a particular opportunity, or maybe all opportunities, should sit on the contacts. And I'm trying to explain to them some of the nuances involved so that we can basically be on the same page. So all I'm going to do right now is, let me just move this over a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simply go over here and let's pick a color and let's start drawing out. So here we have a person, and this person, I explained that we have not only one person, but we actually have usually multiple people within an organization. And those people within the organization in Salesforce, those are referred to as contacts. So we have contact one. Let's do it sort of backwards. We have contact two, and this is contact one. And by the way, nobody really cares how messy you are when you're doing this, so long as it's somewhat legible. So let me explain, okay, fine, we have all of these contacts, but now these contacts all roll up to what's called in Salesforce an account. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to write the word account, and I'll write that's the business or the company. And this account, let's use a different color now. This account has multiple contacts that are associated with it. Now, at the same time, we have something else called, let's use green for opportunity. We have the opportunity, and that's represented as money. And in theory, hopefully, we have not one, but multiple opportunities with an account. So let's go here and let's put another opportunity and another opportunity. And I'll start explaining how the account is associated to all of these opportunities. Now, we could have some situations where maybe let me just get the highlighter here. Maybe for this opportunity, only this individual is involved on that opportunity. So we can absolutely go ahead and make that connection. And that's called the opportunity contact role. So we have a record in Salesforce called the opportunity contact role. And all that really is matching up that individual opportunity to one or multiple contacts. So maybe it's not only this one person, but these two people are involved on this particular opportunity. But neither of these two people are involved in this opportunity right here. So this person now gets associated to this opportunity through a different opportunity contact role. So just by starting to draw things out like this, and again, it doesn't have to be pretty, but as you start drawing it out, people will start to have a much better understanding of the concepts that you're trying to convey. Now, let's say, for example, instead of talking about database architecture, we want to talk about a process, and someone is describing what it is that they do as a business within their business unit, how they operate. So what I would do is I would simply just move on to a plain white spot on my whiteboard over here. And as they are describing the steps in their process, so I will write over here, step one, whatever that step is, and I'll draw it out like that. And maybe we'll have all the details or the different documents or the different people who are involved in that particular step. And then we have over here, step two. And sometimes there's an alternate path, alternate step two, and then we'll explain all of the details associated with that. And then we'll have the other steps over here, and we just start drawing it out as they are speaking. You simply start putting together the stick figures, nothing more sophisticated than stick figures, in order to represent graphically, visually, the things that they are talking about or the things that you want to convey to them. And I can tell you that this totally changes the game when you are having a conversation with someone, because it will allow you to easily start explaining to a senior executive who couldn't care less about how the APIs were built out, to start to explain how System A has a one-way integration with System B, and that's why System A is not getting updated when System B gets an update in it. So I encourage you to explore, just start playing around, and as you start doing it, you're going to start getting more and more used to these concepts, and that will help you excel in your own communication skills when you are interacting with others. So we'll wrap that up, and now let's switch over to the Q&A section. All right, so let's take a look at some of the questions that you guys have. Where's my comments and reactions? Here we go. Okay, let's... All right, so none of you have questions. Okay, great. I have some questions that some folks have asked me. So the first question that I'm just cutting and pasting over here. This one is a little bit long, but let's go ahead and cut and paste it anyway. Oh, great. Yahoo doesn't, YouTube doesn't like the fact that it had too many characters. All right, so I'll read this question. I'll read the full question here. My users are very open, finally, to learning new things in Salesforce. My adoption struggle is with upper management. They don't see the value of the CRM itself. I often find that decisions have to be made to purchase some third-party software in order to perform a task or automation that could have been done in Salesforce. Note, in our company, Salesforce is owned by our IT department rather than sales ops help. So, the way I would address this is I would basically start working with, I would partner up with one or two representatives within the organization, some of the business folks, and get a better understanding of what it is that they do. Similar to what I described earlier when it comes to the training, I would get a better understanding of what it is that they do, how they do it, and what are the gaps that they have with Salesforce. And if it could be done natively within Salesforce, and your IT department has instead gone to the shiny object syndrome and just purchased or installed some other third-party app in order to solve that pain point. This is unfortunately very, very common, especially with IT organizations that instead of trying to learn Salesforce, and they are simply looking for shortcuts. So instead of realizing that, oh, if we just use different synonyms and we Google it or look to see what is possible within the Salesforce platform, that this can actually be solved, they just hear certain keywords that are being, certain terminology that is being shared with them by the business. Then they search for that. They just do a Google search for that, or they look on the App Exchange for that, and that will bring them to a particular app, and they end up purchasing the app just because someone used the word, let's say, donor instead of person. And unfortunately, that happens very often. If senior leadership will not accept changing the status quo, honestly, I would leave. I not leave out of like resentment or anything, but that's a total uphill battle that I would not even, after trying to, shed the light on, here are the problems with the way that we're doing things. Here's how we could have saved money by just using out-of-the-box features that are better supported natively within Salesforce instead of using these hodgepodge solutions that someone found online, if that message does not resonate with senior leadership, I'd be like, yeah, this is a total waste of time, because you're basically going to be just fighting uphill battles at every step along the way, and it's just not worth it. Sadly, this happens very, very often. Okay, I see Monica has a question. Let me put this question on the screen over here. I work for a Salesforce app and train our users. How can I use what you showed us for a wider audience with less touch points? So if you're trying to train the customers who are purchasing the app, that I think that's what I'm trying to that's what I'm understanding from what you're saying. You want to train the users, the customers who have purchased the app. There are definitely some challenges with that depending on the kind of app. So if the user interface is always going to be the same. So let's say if it's something like Box or Conga or DocuSign, where the core interface is exactly the same regardless of which object you're on. Like once they hit a particular button, it's still going to bring up the same kind of screen, and it's really the same kind of steps to perform the actions needed to work with the app. Then I think the model is exactly the same as what I described. It's simply a different, I mean, you're going to have different industries, different types of users that are in different roles, but the common denominator is your scope is narrowly focused on how are these users using your app. So I would sort of reposition everything as, okay, great. I see, Monica, you're saying that I'm correcting my assumption. So let's say it's a tool like, let's say, DocuSign. And I would need to, if I were you, I were responsible for providing the training for the users. The users actually include the admins, the people who are responsible for setting up the app, DocuSign as the example, as well as the business users, the people who are not allowed to configure anything with the app. They are simply the end business users. So I would look for what are the common denominators, what do the admins need to know? So that's one group of users. And what do those folks need to know in terms of interacting with our app, and what is it that the true end users, the business users, need to know when interacting with our app? What are those use cases? What does that experience look like? And you're really following the exact same methodology that I showed you earlier, but it's much more narrowly focused. You're not looking holistically at everything else that they do as part of their job, only what it is that they're doing as it relates to this particular app that you have. Okay, so I see that the other comment that you had is exactly the same. So the other question, I don't have it written in front of me right now. The other question that was actually, someone texted to me last night was, what is the setup that I use in terms of the camera, the lights, the software to create the content that I create? And that is actually a very big question, but I'm happy to be as transparent as possible with all of you. And I will share, Barbara, that is a great question. So by the way, no, it's not ADD, but I noticed that, Barbara. I'm going to get to that soon. So as it relates to the setup and the tools that I'm using, there are actually a lot of different tools. I'm going to start with the camera. The camera that I'm using, you could use any type of inexpensive webcam. And that's how I started. So you can use any type of webcam. I'm using a DSLR camera. In other words, a traditional type of camera that has like a lens that a photographer would use, that's sitting on a tripod, and it is connected through a USB cable to my computer. So I'm using the DSLR camera as if it is a webcam. On the tripod, I also have a teleprompter. I am using the teleprompter right now. I am not using the teleprompter to read a script. I am not reading a script right now. But it is so key to use a teleprompter, especially when you're working remote and you want to be able to make eye contact in a Zoom meeting. You want to make eye contact with folks. The teleprompter is key. The teleprompter will allow you to look straight at the camera, and actually you're looking at the attendees that are in your meeting. So I am looking through the teleprompter, and by the way, if pointing down over here, that's on the teleprompter. I actually have an iPad, which is being used as an auxiliary monitor, where I can just take any screen that I have on my computer and just drag it up as if it's a monitor, and then I am looking at it so it's on the iPad, it's reversed. It's a little bit complicated in terms of how teleprompters work, but that's what I have going on as far as the camera is concerned. As far as lighting is concerned, I am not using the regular lights in my room. I have regular spotlights up on top. Those are turned off right now, and the reason why they're turned off is because the lighting is actually terrible when you do that, and the purple color why did I say green? I have no idea. The purple color that you see behind me, I have very inexpensive LED lights that I got from Amazon pointing at the wall behind me, and the reason for that, and the reason why I'm not using the regular lights in the room, is because when I started creating YouTube videos, I'm just going simple. Webcam, turn on the camera, record, end of story. And what happened was, if you look at any of those YouTube videos, you will see that my skin tone looks like I am a dead zombie, or the exact opposite, it looks like I'm wearing makeup. Why? Because my skin tone and the color of the wall behind me is almost exactly the same. So the camera had no idea what to do with it, and you're trying to overcompensate. The software didn't know what to do with it. It was just terrible. So I had two options. I could either paint the wall behind me any dark color of any kind, it really didn't matter, or just get these inexpensive lights from Amazon and just have them, so I don't even care what color it is on the wall behind me. And by not using the regular lights, instead I have studio lights that are in front of me, but because I wear reading glasses, they are actually pointed up, because otherwise they're going to be blinding. Like the reflection is, you're only going to see the light, you're not actually going to see my eyes with the glasses that I am wearing. So that's as it relates to the lighting. As it relates to the microphone, I'm using it's considered a very no big deal microphone that many podcasters use, connected through USB to my computer. In terms of the software, because I'm using a Mac, I am using a software called Ecamm Live. It is amazing software, and it also helps me with the live streaming, as well as creating any recordings, and it allows me to create overlays like you see right now. I can create graphics in Canva, for example, export them, and I can bring them into Canva, and I can create all kinds of really funky things. I could bring other people on board as well. That's how actually I even showed before my iPad with the picture-in-picture. All of that is done through Ecamm, and also even with the sound effects in the movie, like the trailer that you saw at the beginning, the intro, all of that is being done through Ecamm. Ecamm also works as a live streaming tool. So I actually purchased Ecamm to create my training videos, but I also use it for the live streaming. That's really what it was made for. But I also use it every single day in regular Zoom meetings. In terms of editing, so now with the live streaming, this is not being edited. I'm just, whatever I'm saying is just coming, flubs and all. But afterwards, when I have a video that I want to edit, I use a tool called Descript. Some of you have heard me talk about Descript before and demo it. I freaking love Descript. And basically it allows you to edit any video or audio file as if it's a Google Doc. Crazy cool stuff. Anyway, enough on that. I can talk about that. And by the way, I do plan on putting together some courses on how to use all of the different setup and everything that I have. Connie, yes, it's called, it's just spelled differently. It's ECAMM. Hang on one second, I'll actually show you. Ecamm Live. Hang on, I'm getting their website right now, and I can actually share it with you, and then I will so yes, this is the window that I want to show. And let's go down. So this is Ecamm, and it's an amazing tool, very cool tool, and the guys behind it are like very cool, and they're always introducing new enhancements. Like really great stuff. Let's go back to here, and there was one more question, and sorry, okay. Barbara asked, oh, wrong, sorry about that. Okay, that's embarrassing. So Barbara asked, how do you show complex integrations in a simple way? The way I would do that is, and by the way, I do realize that I'm a little bit over the top of the hour, but if you guys have patience, I'm happy to stay a little bit longer with you guys. I am going to share my screen and I will show you. So let's go back to the iPad. If I want to explain what is going on with an integration that we have. So let's make believe that this is System A. And System A is feeding, in a one way, is feeding Salesforce. So we're starting super simple. We just have System A, and System A is feeding Salesforce. And then we might also have System B that, okay, my handwriting is getting worse by the moment, but Salesforce is then feeding System B, but System B actually has a two-way integration with Salesforce. So a lot of times this will come up in a conversation where someone says, I don't understand, how come I keep seeing duplicates in Salesforce? Well, technically you're not actually seeing duplicates, because what's happening is this. What you're seeing is, let's make this in red. So over here in System A, and by the way, one of the benefits of doing this on the iPad is you can zoom in like that. So let's say in System A, someone is creating the record for Fred Flintstone. So Fred Flintstone gets created in System A and then gets pushed into Salesforce. And someone looks in Salesforce and sees that we have Fred Flintstone, and we also have Freddie Flintstone. So if this is happening between this integration right over here, if there is no logic when the information is getting pushed from System A into Salesforce, if there is no logic to differentiate between Fred Flintstone and Freddie Flintstone to know if it's the same person or not, if we're not capturing things like social security number or a unique ID of some kind, or the entry of Freddie Flintstone has his Yahoo email address and the entry of Fred Flintstone has his Gmail email address. Neither of them have a phone number. Neither of them have a mailing address. There is no way for the system to know whether or not these are the same person or not. And because it's a one-way integration, guess what happens if someone looks at this record and deletes it? If it's a one-way integration, the next time the integration happens, that same record is getting fed back into Salesforce because that one-way integration is not looking to see whether or not that record was already deleted. It's simply pushing in a one-way, pushing it into Salesforce. Now, at the same time, someone might say, you know, I looked at this record of Freddie Flintstone, and today he has no mailing address. He has no other details associated with him. But when I logged in yesterday, he did have a mailing address, and I don't know who did anything. Nobody else is working on that record. Well, if that record, whoops, I did not mean to do that. If this record of Freddie Flintstone is also represented over here, and someone went into this system and made an update to that particular record, well, because there is a two-way integration, it's going to automatically update in Salesforce that entry for Freddie Flintstone. So in order to describe complex integrations, I would start by building out one square at a time to represent each system. I would then have arrows to show whether it's a one-way or two-way integration. I would use an example that is relevant to the members of the team on how these integrations work, or some of the problems or use cases that we're experiencing associated with these integrations, in order to make sure that everyone is on the same page and everyone understands the issue, the problem, the challenge, or the project that we are working on at that particular moment. So hopefully that helps. And I don't see any other questions. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful new year, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.